I am Edgar, a 34-year-old architect living in Portland. 5 years of saving every penny finally paid off last year when I bought my dream apartment downtown, a corner unit with a view of the river. It took months of renovations, but I transformed it into a place that truly felt like home. Then I met Melissa at a gallery opening. For the first year, everything seemed perfect. We shared interests, values, and I thought mutual respect. Until that Tuesday evening, when she casually informed me that her two jobless friends were moving into my apartment, rent-free, and I could take the couch. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever had someone cross a major boundary in your relationship. Be sure to subscribe so you do not miss out on more real-life lessons like this one. The night I met Melissa still feels vivid in my memory. I was attending the opening of a new urban landscape exhibition at the downtown gallery. Photography has always been a hobby of mine, and I was drawn to a particular series capturing city rooftops at sunset. As I stood examining the details of one photograph, a voice beside me said, "The photographer spent 3 months getting access to all those rooftops." Pretty impressive dedication, right? I turned to find a woman with curly auburn hair and bright green eyes looking at me with a knowing smile. Melissa worked at the gallery as an events coordinator. She offered to introduce me to the photographer, and we ended up talking until closing time. She was passionate, knowledgeable about art, and had this infectious enthusiasm that drew people in. By the end of the evening, we had exchanged numbers and made plans for coffee that weekend. Our relationship progressed naturally from there. We discovered shared interests beyond art, including hiking the Columbia River Gorge trails and trying out hole-in-the-wall restaurants. Melissa was spontaneous in a way that balanced my more structured approach to life. Where I liked planning and predictability, she brought surprise and adventure. My apartment quickly became our favorite hangout spot. I had spent months carefully designing each room, choosing furniture that was both functional and aesthetically pleasing. The open-concept living area flowed into a kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room offered a view of the Willamette River that changed with the seasons. It was my sanctuary, the result of years of hard work and saving. Melissa seemed to appreciate the space as much as I did. She would often comment on how peaceful it felt compared to her small studio apartment on the east side of town. "This place has such good energy," she would say, curled up on my gray sectional sofa. "It feels like home." Looking back now, there were early warning signs I chose to ignore, like how Melissa would rearrange my furniture or art pieces without asking, claiming the space needed a woman's touch. Or how she began leaving more and more of her possessions at my place, gradually taking over my bathroom counter and half my closet. 6 months into our relationship, Melissa started staying over 4 or 5 nights a week. I did not mind her presence, but I noticed she never offered to contribute to groceries or utilities despite using them freely. When I gently brought it up, she seemed surprised. "But this is your place, Edgar," she said with a small laugh. "You make 3 times what I do at the gallery. Besides, I bring wine sometimes." I let it go, telling myself relationships were about give and take, and perhaps she contributed in other ways. She did cook occasionally, and would bring home leftover hors d'oeuvres from gallery events. I convinced myself these small offerings balanced the scales. As we approached our 1-year anniversary, I began thinking more seriously about our future together. Maybe moving in officially with a proper arrangement for sharing expenses. I even looked at rings once just to see what was out there. I thought we were building something meaningful based on mutual care and respect. Then came the job loss. The gallery where Melissa worked underwent restructuring, eliminating her position along with several others. She was devastated, and I did everything I could to support her. I took her out to nice dinners to lift her spirits, helped her update her resume, and assured her she would find something even better. "You can stay here as much as you need while you job hunt," I told her, wanting to be the supportive boyfriend during a difficult time. "Save on commuting back and forth to your place." Melissa took my offer to heart, essentially moving in without any formal discussion. Her small apartment was hardly used anymore, becoming more of a storage space for items that would not fit in my place. I began noticing her mail forwarded to my address. When I asked about it, she shrugged it off. It is just easier this way while I am between jobs. You do not mind, do you? I did mind a little, but I told myself this was temporary. That is what you do when you love someone, right? You help them through rough patches. Weeks turned into months, and Melissa's job search seemed to lose momentum. She would apply for positions sporadically, but spent more time meeting friends for coffee or lunch than actively pursuing employment. Meanwhile, I was covering all our living expenses on my single income. The strain began to show not just financially, but emotionally. I started feeling less like a partner and more like a provider. The dynamic of our relationship had shifted without any discussion or agreement. Then came the day Melissa mentioned her friends. Jessica and Tara are having trouble with their landlord, Melissa said one evening as we were finishing dinner. Their building got sold, and the new owner is raising the rent by 40%. That is rough. I replied, sympathetic but not yet sensing the direction of this conversation. The rental market is out of control right now. Yeah, they have been looking at new places, but everything affordable is way out in the suburbs. Melissa pushed her plate away and looked at me with what I now recognize as calculated innocence. They might need a place to crash for a little while. A small alarm bell went off in my head. Crash? Where exactly? Here, of course. She said it as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. We have all this space. I nearly choked on my water. Melissa, this is a 2-bedroom apartment. There is not all this space. The second bedroom is just your home office. You can work at the dining table for a few weeks. I took a deep breath, trying to stay reasonable. That is not really how it works. I have client meetings in there, and all my reference materials and equipment are set up specifically for my work. Melissa rolled her eyes. You architects are so precious about your workspaces. It would just be temporary. How temporary are we talking? A month, maybe 2 at most, just until they find a new place. I was uncomfortable with the idea, but wanted to be accommodating. Would they be contributing to expenses? Groceries, utilities. Melissa frowned. They are both struggling financially right now. Jessica just had her hours cut at the salon, and Tara is still trying to get her online business off the ground. So they would be staying for free. Edgar, they are my best friends. They would do the same for me. That night I reluctantly agreed to a very specific arrangement, one that I now regret not getting in writing. Jessica and Tara could stay for 2 weeks. Maximum, they would sleep in the living room on the pull-out sofa, not my office. And while they would not pay rent, they would contribute to groceries and keep common areas clean. The reality proved very different. 2 days later, they arrived with enough belongings to suggest a much longer stay than 2 weeks. The living room quickly became cluttered with their suitcases, makeup bags, shoes, and clothes draped over every surface. Where is all this going to go? I asked Melissa, surveying the chaos. We will figure it out, she said dismissively. They just need to get settled. That evening I discovered Jessica had indeed taken over my office, placing her air mattress right in the middle of the room and pushing my drafting table against the wall. When I objected, Melissa pulled me aside. It is just more practical this way, she insisted. The living room needs to stay functional for all of us. That is my workspace, I tried to explain. I have deadlines. You can use the dining table during the day when no one is around. Be flexible, Edgar. Flexibility quickly became a one-way street. I adjusted my schedule, waking up earlier to get work done before the apartment became active with 3 women getting ready for their days. Jessica, a hairstylist, often worked evenings, returning to the apartment late and making noise without consideration. Tara spent most days at the apartment running her online crystal business, which seemed to involve a lot of social media scrolling and very little actual business. Neither contributed to groceries as promised. Instead, they helped themselves to whatever was in the refrigerator, including specialty items I purchased for myself. When I brought this up to Melissa, she accused me of being stingy and unwelcoming. They are guests in our home, she said. In my home, I corrected her. A home they are staying in for free. Our home, she insisted. I live here too. You do not pay rent, I reminded her gently. And we never officially moved in together. It just sort of happened. That conversation ended with Melissa giving me the silent treatment for the rest of the evening. It was becoming a pattern. Any attempt to establish reasonable boundaries was met with accusations or silence. Things deteriorated further when I discovered Jessica had invited her boyfriend to stay over several nights in a row. A stranger sleeping in my office, using my shower, eating my food, all without so much as asking permission. When I expressed my frustration to Melissa, she was baffled by my reaction. Where else is he supposed to stay? His roommate has family visiting. That is not my problem, I said, finally reaching my limit. This was supposed to be 2 weeks, Melissa. It has been 3 with no end in sight. I need some indication of when my home will be my own again. The 2-week mark came and went. There was no mention of Jessica and Tara finding a new place, no apartment viewings, no discussions of their plans. Instead, they seemed to be settling in more permanently. Tara began receiving packages for her business at my address. Jessica installed a small shelf in the bathroom for her extensive hair product collection. I tried to be patient. I reminded myself that housing was difficult to find, that these were people important to Melissa, and that relationships sometimes required sacrifice. But my patience was wearing thin, especially as I realized Melissa had stopped looking for work, entirely content to have me support not just her but her friends as well. Then came the morning that changed everything. I woke up earlier than usual on a Saturday, hoping to get some peace and quiet before everyone else stirred. No such luck. As I entered the kitchen, I found Melissa, Jessica, and Tara huddled around the island, coffee mugs in hand, speaking in hushed tones. They fell silent when they saw me. "Morning," I said cautiously, sensing tension in the air. "Edgar, we need to talk," Melissa said, using the serious tone I had come to dread. I poured myself coffee, bracing for whatever was coming. "What is going on?" Jessica and Tara exchanged looks but said nothing. Melissa cleared her throat. "So the thing is, Jessica and Tara's old landlord is being a total jerk about their security deposit. And Tara's crystal business had some unexpected expenses. They are in a tough spot financially." I waited, knowing there was more. "Finding an affordable place in this market is impossible right now," Melissa continued. "So we have been talking, and the solution is obvious. They should just officially move in here." I nearly dropped my mug. "Move in. As in permanently." "It makes perfect sense," Melissa pressed on as if this were a completely reasonable proposal. "There is enough space if we rearrange things. Jessica can keep using the office. Tara can set up in that corner of the living room, and you and I will have the bedroom." "This is my home," I said carefully. "I never agreed to multiple roommates." "And what about rent? I cannot support 3 people." "That is the thing," Melissa said, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "They really cannot afford to pay rent right now, but they will contribute once they are back on their feet." Jessica nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. And I can give you free haircuts." Tara added, "I will share the healing energy of my crystals with the space." I stared